Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mimi Plauché, Artistic Director of the Chicago International Film Festival, and it's my great pleasure to be in conversation right now with director, writer, and producer Lily Horvat from Preparations to Be Together for an Unknown Period of Time. Lily, welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having us.
Oh, it's our pleasure. I did want to mention that the film is competing in our new directors competition at the festival. So thank you so much for sharing the film with our audiences. So I just want to start at the beginning of the film because, I think that opening scene to me, even just those opening shots of that in the airplane kind of really set the tone for the rest of the film. And I mean, at a time where we can't or aren't flying as much as we usually do. But, for me, the airplane and flying, it represents this kind of liminal space or a space in between where you're somewhere, but you're not really anywhere. And you're almost out of time, like outside of time. And again, like I said, I just think it kind of sets the mood or the tone for the whole film, where there's a real sense of, I think, like dislocation and kind of not, being in a very specific place in Budapest, but also kind of being lost or out of yourself at that same moment for Márta. So obviously you could have started the film in the US when they first meet, or you could have just landed us right in Budapest where she goes to the bridge. But could you talk about that decision or kind of thinking about that space of the airplane?
It was quite precisely written in the screenplay, this shot, because it pretty much sums the whole story up, I guess. So it's we begin by being above the clouds, and then we go into them, and we can't really see where we are, and then a clearer picture appears when we land. And maybe I shouldn't tell this, but we were this shot that is featured in the film wasn't shot by us, by me or by the DP, but it was there was an extra shooting day for that, and we planned to travel not to the US, but from Berlin or Milano to Budapest and capture it. And I asked my brother, who lives in Berlin, to make a trial shot, because he does a lot of traveling here and there, and he shot it with a tiny camera, and it was so perfect that even though we went on a big plane with a big camera, 35 millimeters, and tried to record it with our own camera, this initial shot was so much better that the DP Robert Mali worked really hard afterwards doing CGI to be able to include it in the film.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it works beautifully.
For what I
what was it about it, I guess, that was different from what you were able to capture that made it seem just so perfect?
It's weather mostly.
Okay.
It's that the sun is shining at the beginning, and then it's the cloud, as I told you, and
Right.
and you can see Budapest from this point of view.
Great. I wanted to talk about the way that you use kind of the voice. Sometimes it sounds like voiceover narration, but then we realize she's talking to the therapist. And it seems, I mean, definitely it functions as kind of an inner monologue, but then of course she is talking to the therapist the whole time. And kind of the decision, both kind of to use that as that device where we get insight into what she's thinking and how she's relating to her situation, but also these times where you're layering her narration or her discussion with the therapist over other images.
Mm. It was a decision that we made in the editing room, actually. So it was clear, even while we were shooting a film, that it should be a distinct part of the story, and you can see it also on these extreme close-ups that we wanted to make a difference from the rest of the film. But this uncertainty of who she's talking to, if she's talking to herself, actually, that's something that we found out in the editing room.
Yeah, because I mean, it contributes, I think, for the audience to this, and I think beautifully to this constant sense also of kind of dislocation. And while she's trying to understand if she's imagined this relationship, the audience at the same time is also in kind of the state of unknowing, right? And we're trying to figure out, is she struggling, with mental illness, or is he really just ignoring her? And so I think it plays beautifully in that. When I went and watched it the second time, that piece of it was removed because, of course, I need the ending, and I just kind of reinforced like how beautifully that's done, where the audience is constantly also in that kind of state of not knowing, and we're very, I guess, empathetic to kind of what she's going through as we're going through it at the same time.
Yeah, that's really good to hear, because I was always imagining an active audience, for this film, where the own experiences of the viewer really influence how the story is interpreted throughout the story, I guess, and even the ending. I keep getting really different reactions. And it's a bit like this psychological test, this Rorschach test that we also featured in the film. The ending of the film somehow functions like that. For some viewers, it's like a totally happy ending, and other viewers see it as a farewell. Or even these loudspeakers, they see it as a farewell present from Drexler to Márta. And yeah, for me, it's mostly, it's like the end of something and the beginning of something else that she, it's a bit like this proverb that be careful what you wish for, lest it come true.
Well, that's, one of the things that, and I'm going to come back to the Rorschach test, but one of the things that you alluded to, I think, is so well embodied in the title of the film, right? So, you're just using the word preparations. I mean, the whole time seems like a preparation for her, but what's it a preparation for? And then you bring in unknown also into the title. So nothing feels certain, and that's indicated by the title. Can you talk a bit about kind of choosing this title, which I think is very distinctive? And was it sometimes I feel like filmmakers and writers in particular start with that title and go from there. But was it something that you started with, or something that you came to at the end of the film?
Actually, it was the title of an avant-garde theater play that was made by an underground theater group led by Péter Halász in 1972, I think. And I only read the title in some art book many years ago, and I didn't know anything about this performance. And when I wrote the story, or the first draft of the screenplay, then I remember that it was like an outline for my story. And then I started to research what this performance was about, and I found some resonations between the two. So we asked for the rights of
Yeah, I mean, it's quite evocative, right? I mean, just that the title stayed with you when you first read it. So I would like to go back to this question of the Rorschach test. And again, this is a question of like, when did this come in? Because again, it's so the way that it's used. And again, watching the film on the second go around, when I saw the Rorschach test come up and knowing the ending, but it so much kind of foreshadows her, I guess, perception or even the test itself of what her perception of her relationship to both Janos and as well as to love, or to that feeling is. So was that something that was also in the script, or that you brought in later as well?
No, it was absolutely in the script, and I didn't research at all this part. So I didn't want to achieve a diagnosis that is proved, and because I was looking for something like the diagnosis is at the end love itself, and so I tried to imagine myself in the role of Márta and just look at those pictures from the head of my character, and I tried to imagine what can be there. So I didn't even go after it afterwards, what this can mean from a psychiatrist's point of view.
Great. One of the things that I love about the film is it kind of takes the tropes of like that classic, whether it's Hollywood or other kind of romance, and it turns it inside out. And just the fact that you start with that missed meeting, I think it, references for me, of course, like An Affair to Remember, and then more recently, Sleepless in Seattle. But, that's what comes at the end of those films, after kind of a romance precedes it. And then that leads into eventually a happy ending. So I was wondering if you had that in mind when you wrote about it, or, just this thought of turning a classic romance on its head.
Yeah, I think that these dramaturgical cliches are friends of ours, because you can really play well with them. You show a scene where the guy doesn't show up and the girl is waiting for him. It's something that the audience feels, that I know this. I know this situation. I feel at home here. And then in the next scene, turning this upside down and making something unexpected, that was something that really excited me.
Yeah. And I love the fact that in that second time when he goes to the bridge, and and you use this, I think, device earlier in the film when they're kind of mirroring each other, walking together, where she turns and looks, and we think she sees him because a smile or some kind of recognition comes to his face, but then we don't see him after that. The decision is made not to show him, and then that's brought back at the end again when he's waiting for her at the bridge, and then we see kind of this look of recognition or a smile come to his face, but then we don't see her right after that. I think that's just such interesting and beautiful moments for me, because again, you're talking about activating the audience in some way where we're imagining that they're there, but we don't know for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And these mirroring things were really crucial for the story, I guess. We even used it in a way in the sex scene, or in the beginning of the sex scene when they're taking their clothes off, mirroring each other.
Yeah, which also is reflected in the Rorschach test, which is the mirror, right? Yeah. So we have a question from the audience, which I also wanted to hear you talk about. Can you talk a bit about the presence and use of music in the film? I think both in terms of their interest, or their mutual interest in music, but then also the way that you use it for emotional or psychological effect, or emotively.
It's maybe this question is about the diegetic music, right? The classical music in the film. So not the score, maybe. I don't know.
I would love to hear you talk about both the diegetic and non-diegetic use of music.
Okay. So I wanted to build also some world behind the man, of whom we don't really get to know much things, because we always see him through the eyes of Márta, and we see that's not much, and we mostly imagine things about him, and and then I came up with this idea that let it be classical music, that classical music should play a huge part in his life, that also builds him as a character, as a doctor who's an intellectual who goes to concerts, etc. And yeah, it makes him a soulful man, and yeah, with a rich soul. And the first scene I had the music for was this archive scene where the little János sings this Schubert song. I don't know if it's so well known in the US as in Hungary, but it's really commonplace. This the Trout by Schubert. It's in the singing book of pupils, 6th grade maybe, and so everybody knows it. And from then on, then we had this choir scene and the garage scene where they listen to the loudspeakers, and then I was already looking for some Schubert pieces, and then of course the Winterreise is really well known as well, but even the text and fitted really well the story, I guess. And as for the score, it was the composer Gábor Keresztes joined us pretty late, so we were actually done with the editing, and we used temporary music for the editing because we actually really needed it, and the editor Károly Szalai, who's really a super great editor, and he also edited the films of Ildikó Enyedi, who made On Body and Soul, and that's my first film I made with him, but it was a super experience for me, and he has a really good skill somehow for finding these temp musics and pieces of music, and then we used like the tracks from other films or from The Affair, this series, and so it was obvious that we can't use them, and we were really afraid that we fell in love with these and then it will be disappointing for us forever to have them changed, but then Gábor wrote such beautiful things, I guess, that I don't even remember now the temporary music anymore.
That's great. Yeah, it's really beautiful, and I love that it's like you can feel its presence, but it doesn't ever overwhelm the film in any way.
Yeah, and it was like in some American review, it was like maybe in Variety, it was written that it's a spiral staircase, this film, and it was something that we were talking about with him, for instance, the composer. It should be like that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful metaphor for the film. Yeah. Great. You alluded to before too about kind of the close-ups of the character Márta's face. So if you could talk a bit about casting Natasha, because I think so much rests on, because of the use of close-up, and there's so many moments where there's not dialogue, but so much is conveyed through just the expression in her face. So I would love to hear about finding her and casting her and working with her.
Yeah, actually, it's the first big screen role for her. Although she's not 40 as in the film, but a few years younger, but not so much younger. So I was really surprised because I felt that this face was made for the camera. And so I'm really happy that I could be the lucky first one for her. And it was she auditioned quite a few times for the role because it was a huge decision because of what you were saying. A lot of things depend on her, even though we had a good screenplay, I guess, but it was the other part was her performance. it was so crucial for the film. So and I guess she auditioned 5 times maybe before I dared to decide. And to be honest, it wasn't an easy decision, not only because her lack of experience, but also because I felt that we were working together really well, and we could step forward together. That part I felt for sure. But otherwise, we were really far from Márta's character yet by the time I made this decision. And when I decided that it will be her and I will make it with her, then a big rehearsal process started, and we were rehearsing really a lot with her partners and the actual scenes of the film, and there was a really intimate rehearsal process only with her and the DOP. In Natasha's flat, we tried like really like tiny things, like looking into a mirror or answering a phone or opening a door or walking, like to find these small gestures of the character.
Yeah. And I mean, how much do you feel that, I guess, the character then evolved as you did those rehearsals, because you were also using kind of maybe what she was bringing to it? Or was it more a process of kind of working with her to, I guess, mold her into that character that you had envisioned?
Yeah, she's pretty much like I imagined the character in the screenplay. And I have a very strong memory of being at the last dress rehearsal 2 or 3 days before the shooting, and then I felt that, okay, there she is. It's the character already. And while we were shooting, of course, it wasn't easy, but it was fine-tuning mostly.
Yeah. Great. So we have a question here, since we're talking about Márta's character, from an audience saying that he was so convincing. So basically, as she was watching the film, as the audience member was watching the film, I kept thinking that she must have a tumor or something because she's a neurosurgeon, or she could be mentally ill, crazy. But he's such a convincing liar, which would ultimately doom the relationship. So, I think it's an interesting perspective.
I understand. Yeah. I think at the end of the film, when we see him in the door, in front of the door, I tried to give him also justice in a way, because I think you can understand him as well. Not only because he have a difficult situation as a father raising alone his children, but also I wanted to show that you can interpret dialogue between two people so differently. Maybe it meant really just nothing, this conversation at a coffee machine with Márta at a New Jersey conference. It was like a flash or something exciting that went away, and he didn't even think of that. And then this woman turns up and says, "I'm here." It's quite scary if you see it from his point of view. So maybe he wasn't just lying. It's like he got a good reason to be scared, I guess. And if you watch this scene for the second time, I guess you can see this uncertainty of his, if he recognized her or not. And
Yeah, I mean, I think it might be an interesting exercise, or at least a kind of thought experiment, to retell the story from his point of view, right?
Yeah.
Because as you said, you try to give some breathing space for us to see it from his perspective, but ultimately it is about her perception of
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And it's because the main topic of this film is projection, love. So I guess that was really important to show that, okay, but the other party maybe saw it differently.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I mean, I think you talked about how important mirroring was, both in kind of the characters' movements, but also in the reflections that we see, I think oftentimes in the windows or looking through the windows, and what does it mean to see and what your focus is on as the focus of the camera shifts. Okay, so I'm going to come back to another question about the end in a bit. So this is from Milan, can you speak to your decision to have Márta reject the real love from Alex, if it is real love, and pursue the fantasy of love from János?
Yeah, I guess that I have a really simple answer for that, because yeah, she's in love with János. It's not something you decide, I guess, and you know, this film plays in this unsettlingly murky no man's land that separates love from madness, and that's really that's not a thin line, but it's it's an area where we do things that we wouldn't do otherwise in our lives, and I think she's not a crazy woman who does this every year for somebody. It's really a big love story for her, and for Alex, it's really something sad, I guess, and in a way he also project things into his own love story, and he doesn't really see that in this grown-up game between Márta and János, he has no real chance.
Yeah, and relating to that, I mean, you open the film with the stanza from the Sylvia Plath poem, The Mad Girl's Love Song, which again, like, you know, I think as you described beautifully, kind of shows, or I guess puts into poetry that murkiness between love and madness, and again relates back to this idea of projection. Again, was that something that you had been kind of carrying with you, you know, a poem that you had read that you, or was it something that was added later
it was added already to the screenplay, but it was a later draft maybe, and because I was expressly looking for something to put the audience in the mood already in the of the film, so I wanted to them to watch already the first sequences of the film in this light, you know, that something won't be so easy. So you see a woman preparing for a date, and it's sad, and it will happen, and etc. But I wanted them to feel that, okay, something won't be that simple.
Great. So I wanted to talk to you about, you're both the writer and director, which isn't uncommon for a European film, but you also produced the film yourself. So could you talk about that decision to produce your work?
Excuse me?
Oh, I was just wondering if you could talk about your role as a producer, not just writer, director, and that decision to take on that role as the producer.
Yeah, it's important that I wasn't the main producer. We, the three of us, produced the film. It was Dóra Csernáthony, Péter Miskolci, and myself, and it was important for me because it's in Hungary. It's really different than from the US, I guess. The film financing system, it's mostly state funding that you apply for, so producers don't invest their own money. They don't put on a risk, and they apply with the project, and then they manage the actual production of the film. And I felt that maybe they have seeing this, they have sometimes too much power in the making of the film and in the decisions that follow the making of a film and in the film rights, etc. And I decided to found an own production company with a partner, and it was Dora, who became also the dramaturg of the film. It was a super nice experience for us that I felt such a huge support from their side that I felt that if something didn't work out, from the financing part or like in terms of production management, if a location couldn't be, we couldn't achieve to get a location, or something couldn't be financed, then I felt that it wasn't because they didn't try their best, and it was then totally different for me to, okay, then I have to delete 2 pages of the screenplay, but I know that that's
that everything
we had no other way.
Right.
And I felt a huge trust, maybe, and I think most people can work better the way if they feel trusted. That's very true for me, at least.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And I don't know if this relates to this or not, so I'd love to hear what you have to say. But you have a female protagonist at the center, of course, of the story, and she's a leader in her field, right, as a neurologist. And it's also something that's incredibly high level. So she's incredibly accomplished, and yet, we see that she's not respected. And I think more than the way that it's represented, she has to earn the respect of her peers, or the mostly men that she's working with, probably, and has to work harder to earn it than another male doctor might. So to me, it felt like, while this wasn't kind of the main theme of the story, there was kind of this underlying, maybe indictment is too strong a word, of kind of the social value that's given to women and women's work. So I was wondering if you could talk about that, and does that relate at all to kind of, I guess, film production as well?
I guess so, but I wanted her to make a sacrifice for the man, and that was a good way to show this, that maybe it's something that is more common in Eastern Europe than in the US, to underestimate female colleagues in a top position. And although she comes with a CV, that is beyond theirs, but she still has to fight for being respected. And and if you're asking about similarities to my own profession, I guess that's true. And it's I can say that it's so much easier for me now. It's my second feature, and I already I have a record of work, but when I was at the university, and then I went to my own shootings, then I also felt that I have to represent myself as a director, so that my male colleagues accept that and it's a really technical field, filmmaking, also full of male colleagues. But in the same time, I'm really lucky, because I have parents who didn't raise me in a way that girls are not equal to boys, and and it was something that I was surprised about when I was an adult already working. It was like curious for me that, okay, why do you think that I should prove myself to blah blah, and so it wasn't an internal thing for me, luckily.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because you have someone like Márta Mészáros who's kind of been a trailblazer, but then like right now I feel like you and, like you mentioned before, Ildiko are kind of having this moment, and it might be interesting to see how things change in terms of representation.
And I keep reading what Márta Mészáros says, that when she started to direct films, then it was like 3 or 4 female directors in the world, actually, or in Europe, I don't know. It was like Agnes Varda and her, and I don't know. So it's a lot of things changed since then. When I got into film school, it was more girls in my class than boys.
Great. So I kind of want to end because we have one more question about the ending of the film. And I know you said, I mean, I do think you're right that the way that the audience interprets it perhaps reflects something about our own perception of love or the world, or kind of what that reality might represent. But so Rihanna was asking a question about the end. So did the stereo that she's given at the end represent that they were dating and moving in together? Or, of course, then she turns around and he's not there anymore, right? So I know you probably want to leave it open-ended in terms of the interpretation, but
I guess so. So that interpretation that they are dating, that is closer to mine than his disappearance or staying in the dream world. I wanted them to come down to earth at the end of the film, which is an ending not so easy to digest, I guess. But I felt this true. And as for moving in together, I'm not sure. I wanted it to be a bit more complex. That okay, yeah, they're dating, but still he has a kid in school. Maybe that's a beginning of an actual relationship that won't be like a dream world. It's like moving in together and living happily ever after, but it's something that you have to work on if you want it to function.
So an unknown period of time. Well, Lily, thank you so very much for joining us here today. And thank you so much for the beautiful film that we're just so honored to be able to share with our audiences.
Thank you very much.
Great.